So, so what has happened is the world has said, if you fit within this little piece of paper, you're typical, you're normal. But if you're anywhere else, you're on the spectrum, basically. But most people think about the spectrum as being below here. You don't think of, but you hear geniuses next to insanity. They're on the spectrum. It's just a different location on the spectrum. And that's my theory, and I'm sticking to it.
I'm a strong believer that all the issues around DEI and all the stuff in the workplace of the unknown and what we don't understand and why people don't get along is because you don't truly understand. So just explaining what you just did in that 30 seconds gives you a different lens as to, okay, what you're thinking is abnormal behavior is something you really could tap into and learn from, as opposed to running away from and ostracizing. It's the optimized workplace. Didn't I invite you to be a guest?
You said, I think you might have mentioned it. How long have you been doing it?
For 1 year exactly.
Oh, really?
It is. And it's starting to really get traction now. It's amazing, Kedra. It really is.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it really is. Like, to see the level of people who are requesting to be guests on there. Like, before I wasn't really, gating it. I wasn't asking people to apply. I was really reaching out, but I have a really, I think, pretty powerful network. And so
absolutely.
That's starting to turn. And so now people who are like kind of heavy hitters like yourself are like, hey, can I come on the podcast? So it's really getting a lot of visibility, which is really amazing.
That's awesome. Now, is it video as well or just audio? Video as well.
Both. Yeah. And I think that might be the reason as well.
That's awesome. I just do my YouTubes, but I still haven't gone and called it a podcast yet.
Oh, you should. It's really, so one of my coaches, so one of the pinnacle coach I have, his name is Juno. He's a former big time, like, what do they call it? NSA speaker. And he's like, he did all this stuff before he came to Pinnacle. Sold all these companies. But that's one of the things he says is that podcasts are the most underrated media visibility, wealth building tactics out there because it's easy. People love it. They can get it anywhere, and you can get on multiple podcasts and really, he said, I can't remember the words he uses, but you're kind of generating your visibility at 100 times multiple.
Oh, 100%. And that's what I think what I would like to do is be a guest on, and I have on different podcasts. And so, but this is like really out there, but the School of Greatness have you heard of that? Oh my, yeah. And I'm like, I would love to go out there and talk about like, how did this crazy, depressed, suicidal girl end up here, right?
And that's one of the things he says, go on podcasts that are totally unrelated to your industry, because as you can relate to, like, you could obviously relate to the workplace and small business and leadership and all those pieces, but then people find out that you're this incredible expert when it comes to, taxation and whatever. It's like, it's a no-brainer because you have credibility on this area they already love.
Exactly. And I did one called the Neurodivergent, because I'm Neurodivergent podcast. And so and it does. It just makes all the difference, because what we don't ever think of as neurodivergent, my grandson is autistic, right? He's on the spectrum, we'll call it on the spectrum, but I am too on the spectrum. It just was on the talented and gifted side. So but it's still the spectrum. It still thinks differently. And most people think of the spectrum as this one line. Mm-hmm. And if you ask me where I got this information, it just flows through me. But I'm like, the spectrum is not. Just like when you're doing color on a color thing, if you pick black, there's just a black or a gray or a whatever on the line. But if you go in and you can blend those colors and you get that's a spectrum. Oh. So what has happened is the world has said, if you fit within this little piece of paper, you're typical, you're normal. But if you're anywhere else, you're on the spectrum, basically. But most people think of on the spectrum as being below here. You don't think of but you hear genius is next to insanity. They're on the spectrum. It's just a different location on the spectrum. And that's my theory, and I'm sticking to it. And I need to write the book because no one talks about it that way. But whenever I present it to psychologists or like my grandson, she's like, "Oh, you're right, 100% right." I'm like, "Why is no one sharing this?"
See, hold on, let me write this down. I need to, when you come on the podcast, I want to talk about, I think that is a huge underlying issue, neurodivergency and genius, ability, and inclusion. So I'm a strong believer that all the issues around DEI and all the stuff in the workplace of the unknown and what we don't understand and why people don't get along is because you don't truly understand. So just explaining what you just did in that 30 seconds gives you a different lens as to, okay, what you're thinking is abnormal behavior is something you really could tap into and learn from, as opposed to running away from and ostracizing.
Exactly. 100%. And I grew up being told you have no common sense. You're smart as everything, but you have no common sense because my brain doesn't work like normal people. I've been essayed probably about 5 different times, one at a massage. I mean, like literally, because I don't perceive threats like normal people, like typical people would perceive a threat. It's completely different. And it's been good and bad, but it took my grandson coming into the world for me to go, oh, he's on the spectrum? And that's how I think. Well, that's how I do. Well, that's what would have never, I was always in special, talented, and gifted stuff. But you don't realize you're getting taken out of the class just like the resource kids are taken out.
Yeah,
because you're outside of this.
And that is such an incredible illustration you just used. So please remember that.
I can't forget it. Yeah, it's my life. It's my life.
That is so phenomenal. Yeah, so you're coming on. I've already made the invitation. When I find when I got to do something, I just do it right then and there. So I've already sent it. You'll get that from her. And I definitely want you on because I love that. That's brilliant. That is brilliant, Kedra.
It is not mine. It just flows through. And when I see things, I release it into the universe because it's coming through for a reason. Now, I'm sure there's somewhere.
That's bringing up so many other questions for me. Like, so, oh my gosh, I wish we were taping this now, but it's like, okay, so what made you go into numbers and finance versus creative works and things like that, unless that's another part of your personality? Because I see that creativity piece of you so easy. Even when I look at your office background, I see that, but yet you're such a pragmatic numbers and pencils whiz. Like, how in the world?
Right. Well, and and we are actually recording this because we're both recording this.
Oh, that's right.
We are actually recording it. You know what? Actually, I started out pre-med and I wanted to study the brain and how the brain works, which is interesting because when I attempted suicide at 13, one of the counselors, I was so curious after that, like how the brain works and why does it seem like my brain is my enemy? Like there's this little voice in here that's an enemy. And in going through therapy and all of that, one of the therapists said, oh, you're so into that because you're trying to figure yourself out. That's what you're trying to do. And it's great because it's taking you down this road and whatever. But I started pre-med. The reason I'm great at what I do is that I built a business on what I do. I see things that other people don't see. So IRS resolution, tax resolution, credits for business, things that are in the code, but not necessarily doing a tax return. So I have a team for that. Yeah.
I'm a strong believer that all the issues around DEI and all the stuff in the workplace of the unknown and what we don't understand and why people don't get along is because you don't truly understand. So just explaining what you just did in that 30 seconds gives you a different lens as to, okay, what you're thinking is abnormal behavior is something you really could tap into and learn from, as opposed to running away from and ostracizing.